just as an icebreaker, all right? About the year 1900, there was a gentleman by the name of Jorge Rodriguez. And Jorge Rodriguez happened to be a bank robber. Jorge would rob banks in Texas, and then he'd creep across the border to Mexico, where he'd stash all his funds, right? Jorge was so good at this that the Texas Rangers created a special task force just to catch him. And one day, Jorge happened to be walking around in Texas, and one of the Texas Rangers on the task force recognized him and decided to follow him. And he followed him from a distance so that he wouldn't, alarm Jorge. And he watched him go across the Mexican border. He watched him go down into his town, mingle with the people in the town center. Then he watched him go into his favorite canteen. And the Texas Ranger then slipped into the canteen, saddled up next to Jorge Rodriguez, pulled out a gun and put it to his head, and he said, "Jorge Rodriguez, I know who you are. And unless you return every cent of the money that you stole from all those banks in Texas, I'm going to blow your brains out." Now, the only problem with this is that Jorge Rodriguez didn't speak any English. So he didn't know what the Texas Ranger said, but he recognized the fact that a gun was at his head. And he starts to prattle off in Spanish. But the Texas Ranger doesn't speak any Spanish. But at that particular moment, a young boy came by and asked the Texas Ranger, he said, "Listen, I speak English and Spanish. Would you like for me to translate for you?" And the Texas Ranger nodded his head. So he tells Jorge Rodriguez what the Texas Ranger said. And Jorge Rodriguez says, "Listen, tell this man that I haven't spent a cent of the money that I stole from all those banks in Texas. If he just goes down to the town center and stands at the well, faces north, he'll be able to see 5 brick pavers. Count off 5, the 5th one is loose. If he lifts it up, he'll find all the money that I stole. Tell him that and tell him quick, because I don't want to get my head blown off." Well, the little boy turns to the Texas Ranger and he says, "Mr. Jorge Rodriguez is a very brave man, and he's ready to die." From a neuroanatomy standpoint, obviously we know the brain is divided into several different lobes. And each lobe of the brain has its own functional responsibility. The emotions of the brain are centered in the limbic lobe of the brain, and that's a deep area in the deepest recesses of your brain. The thing of importance about this limbic lobe is it's actually one of the first areas in your brain to begin developing. So you're born with a fully developed limbic lobe. Think about this. When a baby comes out of the womb, a baby comes out without being able to rationally think, but they have emotions, and they'll let you know what those emotions are. When they don't like something, you know about it, right? The baby cries. When the baby grimaces, you know what that expression means. The other thing to realize about emotions is that they're contagious, right? So the first area of the brain to develop, we said, is the limbic lobe. And inside that limbic lobe are a couple of structures that are important for us to think about. One is the amygdala. The amygdala is a small structure that's almond-shaped. It comes from a Greek word that means almond. And the amygdala is responsible for determining your emotions. It's essentially a set of cells, nervous cells, that sit in the deep recesses of your brain. There are 2 of them, one on either side of the brain. And what they found in people who've had damage to this area, who have had that area removed, is that these people are perfectly content to sit in isolation, not being around anyone else. They would rather not have human interaction, essentially. Another structure that sits right behind the amygdala is called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus, think of it this way, the hippocampus involves your ability to have emotional memory. Right? So the hippocampus will help you remember Aunt Sally's face. But the amygdala will tell you that you don't like Aunt Sally. Right? Now,